Alrighty. What's going on, everyone? It's the Beast of the North here, back at it again for another narration video. This one is going to be a bit different from the tale of Alth and Orenthal. For one, I will be using less pictures in this one to get the point across, as there are many more scenes and characters to be shown in this video than previously. This one also isn't a short story like Tale of Alth and Orenthal, but is just me describing some key points of Agoran lore. I will be discussing, in this order, the gods, Dagon and his Demis, and each of the unique races. One other point I wish to address here that I forgot to in the first video: these are all AI-generated images except for the map. The map shown right now is the only thing not AI-generated, image-wise at least, that I worked hard to make using a program called Incarnate. It's pretty good. I'll definitely be using it in the future to make some more like city maps and the likes for within Agora. But yep, everything else is AI generated, and I would just like to point out I do not condone the commercial use of AI images. I pretty much only use them for a personal reference and to kind of help highlight the base idea of certain concepts. Like in these videos will always be free, like even if my channel gets to the point where I can have monetization, these videos with the AI images I will always leave free. Yeah, so it would just feel pretty immoral of me to even attempt to profit off of these images, as I put in next to no effort into their creation and the many other controversies around AI images. And before we begin, I would also like to offer a quick shout out to Vinsvet. He has a channel on YouTube that makes phenomenal fantasy music that I've recently discovered allows anyone to use his work so long as they mention him. He made the music I'm using in the background of this video, and I will definitely be using him more often in my future videos now that I'm finally got this video out. And I will of course have a link to his channel in the description for you to go check him out yourself, hear his other music. And with all that out of the way, however, let us begin with the 7 gods of Agora. The 7 are the revered deities of Agora, and the original creators of the world and all its people and animals. They are all worshipped by the Agorans, but some hold higher sway than others, a higher respect, if you will. There are also 20 angels that serve beneath them, acting as judges for mortal souls, deeming those they would find worthy eternal rest in the Agoran afterlife, eternity. The first of the 7 is Aventus, the god of life and free will. He takes on the form of a great turtle, made out of pure fire and prismatic lights. Upon his shell are a great number of multicolored candles that give off colorful flames, each one of them representing a mortal soul. Second is Tanat, the god of death and fate. He is a humanoid skeleton made out of ice, wreathed in a cloak of flowing shadow and holding a scythe also formed of ice. The crimson threads of fate flow behind him, twisting, weaving, and flowing in accordance with his writings. Aventus and Tanat are the chief deities of Agora, the people of whom hold the ideas of life, death, free will, and fate in high regard in their everyday life. Mali is the goddess of love and fertility. She appears as an elf made of many colorful flames. She also has a pair of butterfly wings and feathery moth-like antennae made of prismatic light. Reluvethel is the god of knowledge and magic. He takes on the form of a shadowy man with glowing blue eyes and flowing hair and a beard made of an ethereal mist that also emanates from his elegant robe. He bears an amulet of flames and a grand staff, the head of which is a flowing mana orb surrounded by runes and arcane symbology. Theophora is the goddess of virtue and truth. She takes the form of a bald woman made out of light, wearing a thin, wispy gown of white flames. She possesses several sets of flaming wings and is surrounded by 7 blazing halos, representing the 7 virtues. Atoma is the goddess of protection and blessings to the faithful. The most faithful are closely guarded by her mighty shield of ice and defended by her flaming greatsword. Atoma herself is made of still shadow and bears no face, but also wears a mighty armor and has long flowing hair made of flames. Last but not least is Cahoki, the god of crops and stars. He takes on the appearance of a large dwarf made out of the night sky, countless constellations within his infinitely long beard and glowing eyes of pure light. He is also known to many as Starforge, which also is a mighty artifact held by the dwarves, and is said to be where Cahoki crafted the myriad stars in the sky and worked with Aventus to forge the great sun and moon of Agora. Next on the list, we have Dagon and his Demis. Dagon functions as the devil of Agora and is chained within a deep recess of the void. While eternity is the heaven of Agora, the void functions as its hell. Dagon is the embodiment of sin and the lord and cause of all evil within Agora. He is a great fire elemental, towering above the greatest structures of man, possessing of 4 muscular arms and 2 wretched horns. Though he remains chained to the very foundations of the void, his whispers still seep into the world of the living, and his word reaches his loyal acolytes who work from the shadows to break his mighty chains. Although no Agorans know what his original purpose was, whether he was another angel maybe, or even some separate general beneath the 7, it is known that he was imprisoned in the void back in the First Era for his impudence. He mocked the 7 and their creation of mortal kind, leering and cajoling that these beings were finite. One day, while bored, he brought great power to the High Elves and sowed the rotting seed in their minds that they should rule, and that was the final straw that sent him to oblivion. Outraged and maddened by such betrayal, he found a way to send his voice still to Agora and began corrupting choice mortal souls, becoming some of his Demis. Each of them have stories of who they were and how they were corrupted. In future videos, I'll also explore each of the angels and a more in-depth look into each of the race's cultures, history, and some noteworthy characters from each race. The Demis function as Dagon's will, and each was gifted a sin with which to enact his will upon Agora. In order of creation, first we have Moldric, the Demi of Decay. Once a proud and mighty bear, he now holds sway over all forms of rot and disease, his greatest of works being the Plague of Roses, also known as the Loran Plague, after the city it decimated. It would have ravaged Agora had it not been for the villagers' selfless sacrifice to self-quarantine, dooming themselves to a wretched fate, withering and coughing as crimson petals of fetid flesh slowly drifted away from their bodies. Dagon corrupted him first, as he was at first unable to directly corrupt a mortal soul, but needed the first of his commanders to be able to reach Agora better. So he went to the first being he could find, vomited all over the creature, and instilled some extent of his own breath within it, corroding its spirit as it went on a rampage before finally being put down. Next is Sinx, the Demi of War and Destruction. Once a strong but foolhardy man, he was a renowned wrestler who became rich in illegal fight rings known as the God of Destruction. A mortal calling themselves a god was sure to draw the attention of something. Drunk off his own pride, he fueled the idea that he was unbeatable in the ring, until one day an old man challenged him, thin and leaning on his staff. Dismissing him at first, he accepted after the old man's persistence, and his hefty purse of gold and silver pebbles sweetened the deal, of course. Sinx knocked him out of the ring immediately. Laughing, he began to turn away, but the old man rose again and challenged him once more, only this time with a different wager. As the old man was out of money now, he wagered the winner would have the loser's soul, an eternal servant. Sinx continued to laugh as he stated how he could certainly use a new slave, and agreed. Immediately the old man rose, standing straight up, his withered bones crackled as they suddenly strengthened, and he removed his cloak, revealing a body of rippling muscles and singed flesh. Dagon knocked him out of the ring immediately. The crowd of onlookers fled in terror. Their cries and even the sound of Dagon's laughter were drowned out by the screams of Sinx as his soul was forcefully ripped from his body. Next up is Slythok, the Demi of Deceit and Conspiracies. Once a kind and noble man, his head was filled with treacherous ideas by Dagon, who appeared to him in the form of a frog, masquerading as a herald of the gods. Dagon made Slythok, then the notable Baron Azar Lorn, believe that the true celebration he was attending was a ruse by the other side, that the rulers and speakers for the other nations were going to use this opportunity of weakness to annihilate human leadership and forsake the treaty. Fearful and desperate, he sought to silently eliminate each non-human leader that was there. He successfully killed 2 before being discovered, apprehended, and shortly thereafter, executed. His corrupted soul was rejected by the angels and twisted further by Dagon. Slove is the Demi of Gluttony and Filth. Once a noble man as well, in life he was not so admirable as Lorn Azar, and bled his workers and their fields he owned dry of resources, emptying the forests of game, all to fuel his many extravagant feasts, often attended by very few. Those among his servants counted themselves lucky if they could attend one, as they may be able to enjoy a few measly scraps, whether they fall from the table or from Erden's massive and uncaring jowls. He's the only Demi who needed no extra encouragement from Dagon to reach such astounding levels of corruption. His story is a short and simple one, as he gorged himself endlessly, steadily losing more and more allies as they could no longer stand his filth. Eventually there came a feast where it was just him and his servants, one remorseless guard as well, of course. On that day, Erden the Massive was feasting as usual, when suddenly he gagged, bread, cheese, and meat sliding out of his maw as he clutched at his chest. Well, in the general direction of his chest, at least, as his stubby arms could hardly even reach the side of his own sizable breasts. Erden finally perished, and as Dagon witnessed his rejected soul, he laughed at the insect that greeted him. To Dagon's surprise, however, the insect continued to devour the very space of the void, growing in size until he was again the size of a man. Astonished by such unprompted corruption, Dagon offered him the power of gluttony, and Slove was granted his realm within the void, consuming the souls there in an endless feast. Upon witnessing Slove's corruption, Dagon decided to visit Erden's death, and saw the remorseless guard standing by as the servants began to attempt to carry out Erden's body, and he smiled. Dagon began to whisper into his mind, and the guard dismissed the servants, telling them to find more help. They'll need at least 5 men to carry out that beast. As they departed, the guard approached the table, unceremoniously swatting Erden's massive paw of a hand off. Grabbing a chunk of cheese and prying the goblet of wine from Erden's other hand, the guard strutted around the room, enjoying his simple feast at first. Dagon sensed more and bade the guard not to hold back his desires. Smiling, he drew a key from his keyring and, grabbing an entire platter of exquisite cheeses and bread off the table, made for the cellar door and began sampling the wine stored there. As he went about enjoying the feast of his own, he ran out of food but continued to indulge in wine, drinking himself well past the point where he should have collapsed. He had sampled everything in the cellar and nearly finished off a barrel of aged white wine before he finally did collapse. The servants returned, with additional servants and guards in tow, and upon seeing the cellar door open, investigated to find the guard's slumbering form. He was arrested then and taken to jail for his theft, where even then he continued to indulge in anything and everything that was presented to him. Consuming leftover rot in his cell, pleasuring himself on any sin he could while he was there, until the guards performed their own execution. Tiring of waiting on an official order and being forced to witness his depravity, they plotted amongst themselves and framed one of the servants for his murder. Dagon laughed once again as the guard's soul appeared before him, clutching a glass of wine and bearing a drunken smile, and gave him power as well. The guard, whose name was lost to history, then became Hedon, the Demi of, well, hedonism. Any and all forms of overindulgence and debauchery were his realm. Alth Nar is the Demi of pride and patron deity of most orc tribes. Once an orc himself, he was the most prideful of them all, and took efforts of beauty never before seen for an orc. Manicures, makeup, he's even regarded as the person to invent nail polish, and he spared no expense. Well, he would have spared no expense if there was any expense, for most of the dyes and colors he obtained were during his campaigns as a fierce war chief of a once great clan, the Thunder Mauls. There are many orcs who questioned his choices, of course, but those who questioned a little too loud soon found themselves silenced, for none could oppose the mighty Alcath, him and Sinks being the only of the Demis to keep their original names. How did he die and become a Demi? Once again, Dagon had found a target to whisper ideas to, ideas of conquest and dominance. Alcath awoke suddenly in the night and let out booming laughter, and felt the indomitable spirit of Sinks invigorate him as the laughter grew in might and power, waking the camp around him. Alcath had imagined too little, and the humans were too weak to accomplish what he now envisioned, the world. Alcath would gather the orc clans and march across Agora, no longer simply raiding rival clans or the occasional traveler. He would rule everything, and crush those who would oppose him. Thankfully for many, this catastrophe was mostly avoided. What is known today as the Green Pact, which was a temporary alliance between orcs and goblins, banded together for one final time. Heeding the wisdom of a vision of doom by a mysterious and hunched horned soothsayer from Lake Prenatus, the goblins and opposing orc clans banded together and meted swift retribution upon the Thunder Mauls. Though both sides faced heavy losses, the battle was won when the chieftain of Clan Warblade, Vela, swung her axe and decapitated Alcath, who was roaring every second of the battle. It was the sudden silence, the missing howling, that caused everyone else to freeze and look to the direction it once came from. The remnants of the Thunder Mauls cowered and fled as Vela held his head aloft and let loose a roar of her own, drowning out the cries of cheer from the other orcs. Disgraced by his defeat, Alcath made a vow to do everything in his power to bring Warblade to shame, and even as he felt the forceful tugs of the angel's hands, he glared at Vela with hatred. When his soul was deemed unfit for eternity and tossed to the void, Dagon waited for him as he landed, wondering what form his soul would take, and whether or not he would still grant him power. Alcath simply lay there, panting heavily, and it wasn't until Dagon started to turn away in disgust that finally he reared up, roaring once more. This time the roar was so powerful it shook the void in every corner of its endless depths. It is said that many demons stopped what they were doing for a moment to ponder, granting some poor souls a single moment of peace from their eternal torment, the only kindness Alcath shall ever commit. As Dagon turned to face him again, Alcath unfurled his wings and flexed his tail, both draconic in appearance, and Dagon was pleased. For the next one, the second from last Demi, is a different tale, as Baal, the Demi of deals and unholy pacts, was not once a mortal soul. By this point, Dagon had garnered much power and was able to mold spirits himself, and created a being formed of his own flesh, if one could even call it that. He sent Baal to the Shimmering Dunes, home of the Pharaoh and Pharaoh, who I'll speak more of before too long, to test his power. Here is where the tale of the final Demi takes place, the first tale of two, for Sheox, the Demi of Madness, is comprised of 3 spirits. Baal and Dagon came to the capital of Kahira and visited a young princess, alone and crying in her room. She had just learned that she would not be queen, as that privilege belonged to her elder sister. Oh, how she had dreamed of becoming queen one day, and oh, how Baal charmed her into believing it would still come true. If something happened to her sister, then she would be next in line. Let me be clear here. This was not the first murder in Agora. No, not by far. But it was the first time it was a child, the first time a child tore away their own precious innocence. Not knowing what she was doing, her sister managed to let loose a scream and several gurgled cries as she plunged the dagger in and out of her chest. It wasn't hard for the guards to discover her as she stood there, holding the dripping dagger, saying, "Now can I be queen?" Their mother was beyond heartbroken at the sudden loss of her daughter, and even her son had suddenly vanished. But she knew she would not put little Mita on the throne. She could see the monstrous thoughts now swirling behind those black orbs. Mita died in the desert after being banished, and the queen suffered a heart attack not long after. Mita's soul went to the void and met Dagon with another soul. As Mita was young and had white fur and black eyes, this man was old with black fur and blinded white eyes, twitching and clawing at nothing he perceived nearby. He was an unknown farmer living alone with his wife, and one day, like any other, she loaded a small cart and trudged off towards Carthage with her meager crop to sell in the city. Unlike any day, however, Alth Nar came by, walking the world one final time before fully becoming a Demi. Already rather disdainful of Roshi, he saw this withered old man who could hardly see at all, and deemed him unworthy to witness anything fine, such as himself, and beat him. Alcath laughed as he walked away, dusting himself off as the man shook and coughed on the floor, now fully blinded and injured. Dagon also took amusement and whispered treachery into his ears, venomous lies about the world around him and that his wife was dead and he was next. The old man had gone mad and genuinely believed the world out to get him now. Several days later, he waited by the door, clutching a rusty sickle to his chest, waiting for the next person who would come in, the next person masquerading as one of their children come to visit, the next person trying to poison him with pies, and stick the blade through their heart. Finally, when the door did open, he lunged, relishing as he felt his weapon pierce flesh. Just then, Dagon returned to sight, and the old man screamed at what he saw. his wife's lifeless eyes, his wife's bleeding chest, and his rusty sickle jammed in her heart. Dagon continued to laugh all the while as he held his wife close one final time, as the flame he set to their home engulfed them. The pauper known now as Dementia and the princess now known as Innocence Lost stood before Dagon as he produced another spirit, Schizophrenia. Born of Dagon's flaming flesh, he became the glue to merge these two together. His final Demi and his masterwork, an amalgamation of two mortal souls and an artificial one merged to become one. While they, as in Sheox as a whole, are most commonly known as the Demi of Madness, all afflictions of the mind are their rule. Anything from a simple nightmare to the deepest depressions they have formed lovingly with their twisted hands. Many believe that dementia continues to act against the three other minds that compete within this singular form, seeking redemption in any form possible, but is constantly put down by the overwhelming force of the others, screaming and writhing within the depths of their mind as he is forced to witness the atrocities committed with what felt like his own hands. Because of this, he often finds himself simply asleep within their mindscape. Unbeknownst to him, his twisted nightmares manifest in their realm within the void, causing chaos and pain to the souls imprisoned there, causing much laughter and joy for his other selves. Now I shall briefly highlight each of the unique races of Agora and provide a little info on where they live and the real-life cultures I've based their cultures off of. First off with humans, nothing too special, we all know about humans already. Nothing much has changed with them in Agora. They are the most spread out species to inhabit the lands and can be found practically anywhere, but of capital states in Carthage, Carthagena, Ariland, and Hui. These states are based primarily on feudal Europe, with some variation depending on the state. While Carthage is the biggest capital of humankind, featuring towering stonework ruled by lords and knights, Ariland tends to have smaller structures, still ruled by lords, but it is more rural, and based off of old Gaelic cultures, and is the native land of hippogriffs. Next up are dwarves. Much like in popular culture, they are a proud race who thrive underground, but I've made some changes to their culture within Agora. The largest change is that I am basing them off of Eastern Asia, primarily China and Japan, not only in culture, but in architecture, weaponry, and armoring. Primarily settled in the mountains of Alderth, they are strong, proud, and intelligent people, regarded as mighty warriors, gracious hosts, talented craftsmen, and brilliant inventors. Many dwarven women grow beards and care for them much in the way any male dwarf would, but some do prefer to remain clean-shaven, especially if they often have dealings with other races regularly, as they often aren't used to women or even children having such magnificent manes. While orcs may not possess any singular state, they can also be found all across Agora, more commonly in unclaimed regions like Aventus's Gap, where they live in small tribes or clans. Real fast, I must also point out my disappointment with the AI I used and how it generated the orc woman. They are just as tall as the men and also possess impressive tusks and muscles. But hiring professional artists would be too much for this small project, so I begrudgingly shall take what I can. Large, strong, and generally regarded as a violent race, few realize how incredibly passionate orcs are. They care for their clans and will fight alongside those they trust to their last breath. While the alliance once held between goblins and orcs has not been honored in decades as of the events of Fate of Agora, there can still be some goblins found living within orc encampments, serving as advanced weaponsmiths and tinkerers. Goblins all across Agora are primarily tinkerers. There aren't many of them around, and most of them only want to mess around with various tools and contraptions. They can also be found almost anywhere as well, but mainly live on the outer edges of Howl Silver and Aventus's Gap, near Alderth, where they often peddle their wares in attempts to outdo the dwarves with their own craftsmanship. Speaking of Howl Silver, these two massive peninsulas are home to the Wood Elves, known to some instead as Sea Elves due to their affinity for sailing and love of surfing. They have similar skin tones, eye colors, and hair colors to humans. The two peninsulas are divided and owned by two rival companies, long owned by the northern Silveski family and southern Galski family, or Silver and Gold families respectively. Members of these families will more often than not have blonde or silver hair, marking them as members of prestigious bloodlines. The mainland section of Howl Silver is home to the ones most would consider wood elves, who live in camouflaged, moss-covered homes in the forest, as opposed to their coastal brethren who live on stilted wooden homes. Dark elves are quite different from their surfing cousins. They have only gray skin tones, ranging from a lighter gray to nearly pitch black, and most tend to have brown or pinkish colored eyes. They can primarily be found in two places: the Telvan Ashlands to the east of the main continent of Agora, and the cursed land around Dagon's Claw Lake in the center of Agora. These Dagonic Dark Elves, as they're known, undergo a ritual from a young age that protects them from the corrupting energies of the land, but cause them to sprout horns that continue to grow as they grow older, and their eyes fully red. Wood Elven ships are often hailed for their speed and maneuverability, while Dark Elven ships are renowned for their superior durability, fit for sailing the raging sea to the west, at the very end of Agora where many can also be found. Despite their relatively reclusive nature, or perhaps because of it to some people, Dark Elves are generally found distrustful and not regarded well in most areas of Agora. Dagonic Dark Elves especially, due to their unnatural horns and crimson eyes. With the High Elves of Agora, we're about to get a bit darker, so quick warning there. They have long been extinct as of the events of Fate of Agora. When they did exist, however, they were pompous, self-righteous perfectionists. Possessing of golden skin, golden hair, and golden eyes, they shunned anything they deemed abnormal, such as different hair or eye colors, or even twins. Oftentimes, if a mother gave birth to twins, they would be encouraged to judge them and deem one of them superior, while the other would be euthanized. Same thing would happen if any children were born with differing eye or hair colors. There are some in Agora who would like to believe that not all High Elves were such monsters that a mother would truly exterminate their children like that, but none exist now to confirm or dispute such a claim. They had above-average physical strength and superior magical abilities, and used their power to dominate and enslave most other life forms on Agora, and ruled for over 100 years before a revolution drove them to near extinction, and the gods deleted them from existence by sending an angel of Tanat to erase them from the threads of fate, nearly 400 years ago, ushering in the Second Age of Agora. The Giants of Agora, also known as trolls or ogres, are a semi-sapient race of large humanoids with stone-hard skin. They are the only race on this list lacking a Prenatus line, meaning they weren't created with the rest of the peoples of Agora and lack an original, pure bloodline. They were instilled with a lesser breath by Dagon, who was jealous of the mortal races and created these lesser beings in mockery of them. They are a hugely primitive race, valuing physical strength above all else. They are aggressive to all other forms of life and are primarily found in warmer areas of Aldearth, but a few small tribes exist in Crag Mountains as well. Now we will delve into the Roshi of Agora. Roshi being the plural form of Ro, meaning beast or animal folk. So the first one on the list, Faro, are fox people, literally translating to fox animal person. Many of them bear physical similarities to fennec foxes, but some who live outside of the Shimmering Dunes resemble red foxes instead. No matter where they hail from, however, many are often hailed as shrewd tradesmen, wearing a big smile in the hopes of making a sale. Even those who don't become traders or thieves often employ a strong, charismatic energy to whatever they do. Living with them in the dunes are the Pharaoh, or Jackal people, who tend to take on many of the more physical jobs required, such as construction, security, and camel tending. Both Fa and Fey Roshi culture are based off of Arabic and Egyptian cultures. They are governed by a wealthy group of individuals known as the Merchants Guild, with an economy focused around trading the many precious minerals and other valuable materials within the dunes that give them their distinct glimmer, thus the Shimmering Dunes. Just south of the dunes is the massive state of Valor, covered mostly in thick jungle, rife with a diverse cast of life forms, both magical and mundane. One of my favorites of which being the kawa, a unique fruit that appears like a stick sprouting from the mud. Purple flowers sprout from the top when it is ripe for harvest, and it can be eaten as is for a plump, juicy sweet snack, or dried to make a more savory jerky. It is quite beloved by Valor's primary inhabitants, the Karo, or cat people, who live within the towering canopy of trees and suspended jungle huts connected by rope bridges, and a unique form of transport called lufas, being long lines of gondolas controlled by a complex rope pulley system that spans most of the jungle. The Karo are a rather tight-knit community based off of various African cultures who love all sorts of sweet foods and often host celebrations rife with music, dance, food, and magic. the chiefest of their celebrations being the Festival of Valor, where the current Lord or Lady of Valor parades across the entirety of the state, greeting and hearing the voices of their people. The entire state is covered in public stalls and bathed in music. The date changes to the coronation date of their current ruler and is held on that day each year. To the west of Agora are the treacherous peaks of Crag Mountain, inhabited by the wolf people, Lupro. They do not possess a single governing body. The leaders of each pack, or an individual delegated by the Alpha, convene to travel to Carthage any time the Lord Khan calls a meeting of state rulers. They are one of very few cultures in Agora who still practice the ancient forms of magic, before it was divided into separate schools. While each pack may be ruled by the strongest, both of body and of soul, the shaman is regarded as the most respected individual within a pack, and are the sole bearers of magic. As of traditional roles at least, many packs are swaying their laws with the changing tides of time. They are based primarily off of Viking culture, but I'm also drawing inspiration from old Russian traditions and language. The northern state of Sinter is a massive swampland inhabited by the Aro, who are lizard people possessive of various features such as neck frills, gills, or rarely crocodilian body structures. They are a strongly spiritual people based off of Native American cultures who tend to rely more on magical prowess than technological might. They are also the only race to have a symbiotic relationship with another life form, being the native swamp bulbs of Sinter, some of which will begin to glow with a natural form of mage light. These bulbs will sometimes be relocated and protected to grow abnormally large. Over time, they will hollow out to expand further. The light will then move inside and become a natural dwelling for the Roshi, while the Roshi protect them from parasites and other devouring creatures. The state is physically split in two by a massive river. The northern area is known as Uma, and the area south of the river is Veda. There are two groups of elders from each area that serve as the governing body for Sinter, known simply as the Uma-Vedan Council. While it is often consisting of old and wise masters of magic, rarely young prodigies may be invited as well. The final sentient race of Agora is the Raro, or Rat People. They live in a massive series of connecting tunnels and caverns beneath the entirety of Agora, forming the underworld kingdom of Gliridam. While they have become self-sufficient to an extent, not being a part of the Empire and subsequently cut off from most of the world, has left Gliridam in a rough state, and crime runs rampant. They have adapted to this in a way, however, and have integrated crime into their culture and way of life, with a select few who are not fair game, being bearers of the seal of the Prince of Thieves, signaling them as friends of the governing body and off-limits. The few jail cells that exist within the Temple of Spoils are reserved for fools who try to rob friends of the prince, and for the few who engage in truly wretched crimes, such as murder. Their culture may be unique, but their architecture and fashion I have based off of Victorian London. Despite rampant crime, they are generally very content with their lives, and true to real rats, are notoriously clean despite the world viewing them as filthy vermin. There are also a number of documents within Agora that seem to suggest there once existed other species of Ro, the oldest of these documents specifically mentioning a type of weasel or ferret people. These lost species of Agora were likely eliminated early on, either from predation, the initial attacks of the High Elves, or possibly eliminated by others, leaving them either extinct or possibly hidden from the world. To the northeast lies the Frozen Isles, a treacherous ice-scape inhabited by foul, unnatural creatures known as ice devils. The glaciers surrounding the area are littered with scattered remains of ships. Curiously, no bodies are found anywhere, however, despite the mass graveyard otherwise surrounding this area. The few who have ventured close to the Isles and survived to tell the tale swear they could just make out the tip of a tower, made of blackened stone and smeared in a sickly green magical energy, but they are a story for later. Lastly, a very short overview of the oceans of Agora. The raging sea, as one might be able to guess, is in a constant maelstrom, and home to a number of creatures accustomed to such wild waters. The Grey Ocean, however, is quite calm most times of the year, but is prone to thick mists that cover much of the water, leading seafarers to develop powerful methods of magic to part the fog, to be able to see not only the water, but the stars above as well. And with that, slightly over 6,000 words in, is a collection of some of the most basic information on Agora, detailing each of the gods, the Demis, and the people of Agora. As I have said before, I will make other videos in the future, likely much faster than this one took to make, as they will be much smaller in scale, discussing certain aspects of Agora more in depth. Let me know down in the comments what aspects you would like me to explore first, whether it's cultures and pastimes of a certain race, the names and forms of the angels, or even a list of more unique magical and non-magical creatures and plants within Agora. That all being said, however, this will be the end of the video. I'm going to thank you all so much for watching and listening, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.